And now, from Pensacola, Florida, it's Within Reason with Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin.
Okay, welcome to another edition of Within Reason. Bob Kerrigan and
Bill Rankin.
Mr. Rankin's with us tonight. He has some interesting insights into our local government.
Well,
now
we've been talking about a lot of the things that have happened recently with our local government. Bob and I have before the show, and I begged indulgence of everybody here for about a 1-minute rant. We've got the county commission, which is going to encourage jobs and increase stuff, just passing out favors to their friends, like throwing moon pies off a parade float. I mean, it's dreadful. It's past the point where the antics of the politicians are funny or can be forgiven. We've got the city council fussing and fuming in their petty dysfunction and feuds and threatening the efforts to get the pension plan under control, which is an existential threat to the city. And at the national level, it's not that this corruption eats around the edges of the system. Corruption's built into the system. The laws get passed, you show up with enough money, you get what you want. And this is a democracy. It's time we did something. And I've got some ideas that we'll come up with later in the show about how we as citizens, not plugged in, not draining the system, not feeding on the dying carcass of this poor county, can make things better.
Well, good. Let's start with the county commission decision to award raises to everybody who showed up, and they had no money to do it. You have a comment about that?
Yes. We work in our business. We work very closely with the people we supervise. We talk to them every day, and we're working on stuff together. And we know when they've got kids in school and they're struggling with tuitions, or maybe their car is broken down. And you'd really like to, you'd like to pay them more, but it has to be balanced against. You have to have money to pay them. And the money, there's money for other needs. So you have to have a balance. We think they're fairly paid. If we could pay them with other people's money, think our employees would make some more?
I think we'd be.
And that's what's going on.
Quite generous if we could do that.
Yeah, it's so easy to be generous with other people's money. And go all the way back to when Governor Scott pushed through having the public employees pay 3% toward their retirement. And the county said, we can't have them paying into their retirement. Let's get some taxpayer money and fill in that hole. Right. It's tragic. It's just awful. And we don't do anything about it. Listen, Wilson Robertson demonstrated his total, not his incapacity to govern, but his unfitness for governing by getting his friend a job improperly, and then just throwing his friend an extra $10,000 of taxpayer money. Then he got voted back in.
Correct.
Now, unless his opponent was just released from prison the other day, what's the explanation for that? Did people forget? Do they overlook it? Do they think it's okay?
What do you think businesses, considering coming to Escambia County, and let's just say they watched the Valentine and the County Commission meeting where we apparently had a load of people that were armed in the courtroom that had an interest in the sheriff's budget, and the sheriff is now doing that. Before he was elected, by the way, he made a statement that he would never, ever permit armed deputies to be in the County Commission chambers to intimidate the County Commission. He would just would not permit it, okay? So you have all these armed people, all these armed deputies that somebody has sent. I suggest it's the union, because the union basically runs law enforcement. And they send all of these armed people, and they say they want more money. And the county commission says, okay, we're going to give everybody a raise. And they didn't have any money.
Have the money.
And to Grover Robinson's great credit, he said, what are we doing? We don't have the money, and we've just told these people.
And Ernie Lee McGahey, on the way out the door, passes out a lot of taxpayer money.
Well, disgraceful can't hardly describe that. That was unconscionable for him to do that. and caused a big ripple among other constitutional officers. We have the tax collector. We have the appraiser, the property appraiser. We have these constitutional officers that are supervisor of elections trying to do the right thing. They're holding the line on costs, in some cases turning money back to the county. And then we have this completely irresponsible act by the clerk, who is no longer going to be clerk. And then we have a county commission that does this impossibly irrational, stupid thing. So I just want to ask this question. Mr. Valentine, aren't you supposed to be a big-time businessman with some kind of big-time business experience? I mean, you're running this like a hot dog stand. How in the world can you do this sort of thing with a straight face? We're going to get to your gas tax operation in just a minute, but the question, rhetorical, how in the world can you claim to function as a person responsible for the economic development of this county when anybody who sat in there and watched that would say that the level of incompetence can't adequately be described?
And if you were considering relocating a business and kind of caught yourself caught up with county politics and thought, well, I guess the way to succeed around here is be a friend of George, because he's involved in doing favors for his friends, as they all are. And maybe I'll go somewhere else. Maybe I'll go someplace where it's not quite so corrupt, like New Jersey.
Maybe. I want to read from the Pensacola News Journal editorial. By the way, Shannon Nickinson has been writing some killer editorials. I mean, just killer op-ed pieces. But this was
the piece on Sunday was
this
terrific.
editorial on Sunday that was written by the editorial people in the newspaper. And they usually don't sign the person's name that did it, but I want to read it. He says, make no mistake, last week was a very visible struggle of the status quo against the new and bold, speaking of the city council against the strong mayor, with little contract negotiation drama thrown in, for good measure. The public has a right to know, thundered Councilwoman Megan Pratt. No, in this case, the public has the right to adult supervision in the council. Who can take all this seriously? Who would take our city seriously? So the police, a group with significant political muscle, and I might add, and armed, okay, applaud while a lapdog city council prepared to storm the gates and overthrow the wickedly ironic strong mayor city charter. Meanwhile, we are crime-plagued. Many of our citizens live in deep poverty. We have no, as in zero growth. Really now, exactly who's calling whom disheveled? As you will recall, in a side swipe, which was apparently just totally calculated to discredit the mayor, when he was downtown with his family, one of these officers, and I think the person was actually anonymous, said that the mayor appeared disheveled and not in his normal, orderly state, suggesting he was drinking, which was false. And they knew it was false when they said it. He had his family with him. They were eating hot dogs. He had other city staff with him. I mean, it's just this kind of cheap junk that's going on. So this editorial paints the city council as dysfunctional, and thank goodness in a 5-3 vote they decided not to go on with their investigation powers, okay, because they had no idea what they were doing. City attorney wrote a memo and said, in essence, you don't have a clue what you're doing. You're starting an investigation. You don't have any procedures in place. You don't have any due process. You don't even know what you're doing, so don't do it. So they voted 5-3 to abandon it. We have that going on in the city council, and we have this debacle going on in the county commission. Yeah. How do we expect businesses to try to come here? On what basis would a business try to relocate in this community now?
And here's what's wrong with this. Okay, the city council, at the instigation of the police department, acts foolishly. Editorials, they reverse themselves, they put their tails between their legs, and off they go. So, end of story. No, here's what's wrong. The administration is in negotiations with our city law enforcement, and it's mainly over pensions. And we've had this many times on this show. The pensions, which eat up all the ad valorem taxes Pensacola collects and more, are an existential threat to the city. They really, this pension problem, unless we get a grip on it, threatens to shut us down, where we're doing nothing but paying pensions. In fact, you could look at it look at the millage you're paying to the city on your ad valorem taxes. All that goes to pensions. The cost of pensions now is something like 73% of salaries. How can you run a business like that?
You can't.
It's crazy.
Right.
So, the mayor's trying to take a hard line. Now, if all of this goes through impasse and goes to mediation, it comes back to the city council. And the city council sending the message, just hold on. We'll take care of you. We'll give you whatever the hell you want. Because when the real crisis comes down, we'll probably be out of office or retired. What the city council needs to do, and what we as citizens ought to tell the city council, is we want you to take a pledge and make a firm stand that if you come back to the city council with this pension crisis and you want more money, when there's not going to be a defined benefit pension plan, we're not going to be spending any more money than your last offer, so get right and negotiate in good faith and get this straightened out so the city doesn't spend all its money on your pensions. And we've already talked about the abuses of the pension system, the overly generous nature of it, and so now the police are just telling the city council what to do, and this is the organization that's going to decide how this all comes out. Well, why would they do anything but stall and wait around till the city council?
They're ace. They have the ace in the hole.
They show up armed and all that stuff, and maybe that's okay. And I don't know if, I mean, at one point we said, well, the policy ought to be, if you're on duty, what are you doing sitting around here? We've got enough security. And if you're not on duty, why don't you come in civilian clothes? Well, maybe they get, like in the military, you get to dress in your uniform if you want. Why wouldn't the city council have a little spine and say, if you're showing up here just to make sure we know you want raises, you don't have to buy. I mean, you got a right to show up here. That's fine. Go ahead and eat the donuts. But you're not going to change the outcome of this by showing up in a phalanx of stormtroopers.
Well, unless they address immediately this movement of the people who want the money by, and I would think a resolution that they stand firmly in support of the mayor's position on pensions, period. They stand united. No more backbiting and silly manipulation and maneuvering. We stand totally united with the mayor. We are not going to be your ace in the hole to give you whatever you want. And here's the reason. They want $800,000 in bonuses for openers. The city doesn't have the money. And unless they close this pension fund, unless they close it and make people that are new hires go to the state retirement system, this thing is spiraling down. We've talked about the unfunded liability, which is an esoteric concept, and it is confusing. There are people, Bill really understands this, Mr. Penzone and others really understand this issue. But it's pretty simple, really. Right now, in order for us to go forward, we are counting on an 8% return of invested funds as implicit in the pension plan structure and the unfunded liability. If that even drops to 6%, the number is staggering in terms of the unfunded liability, I think over $200 million. Yeah.
And you're not going to get 8%.
Not going to get it. So we face a huge problem with pensions. The city council has to know it. Let's assume that most people in the city council just don't understand it. Well, go ask somebody who does.
Well, yeah, but Dave Penzone made a presentation to them.
I know he did.
Mr. Penzone is an accountant who's generously donated, free of charge, a lot of his time. He ran the mayor's pension commission, and Bob's been generous to me. Really, Dave Penzone figured it all out, knew it, wrote the report, and the rest of us said, sounds good, Dave. He's got it figured out, and he's not some alarmist, and he's not a politician, and he's got no axe to grind, but he says this is a very serious problem for the city of Pensacola. This stuff is out of control. And why not, if you're in the city, send an email to the at-large council people and your councilman and say, are you, yes or no? Just give me an answer, yes or no. It won't take long. Are you going to come out publicly and say you stand behind the mayor's efforts to get rid of defined benefit pension plans? Are you committed to making real progress in getting this pension under control, or are you just going to engage in petty jealousies and narrow-minded feuds while the city burns?
Excellent point, excellent question. And you can ask your city council person, do you understand the pension problem? That will evoke some response. If they say yes, your next email, will be, how do you plan to solve the problem? Okay, you can't ignore this anymore. You just can't ignore it anymore. You know, Bill, we got another problem in the city. Now, it's fine, and I know you and I disagree some on the ballpark, and I know you have felt that it's been well-run, and you've made other very complimentary statements about it. I think it's a fiscal nightmare, and here's the reason. Starting next year, all of the bonded indebtedness that the city can possibly borrow from the Community Redevelopment Agency, it was $40 million. It cost a lot more than that, Bill, a stadium, like 55 or 60 million, but they got some other money in it, tax credit money or whatever. But that's the debt, okay? That's going to require $3 million a year, and it costs about $1 million to run the CRA. Their total revenues from the CRA, which is all the property within this district, is $4 million.
Right.
It's eaten up.
Eats it all up.
But next year, we're going to have to start paying from those resources another $1.3 million for 20 years, the cost to move the sewer plant. And the money is not there. That money's not there. The city is going to have to make up that money. It's just not there. We have a revenue shortfall. We have more expenses than we're going to be able to meet with the CRA. It's crystal clear. And they're not deriving any appreciable return from the Community Maritime Park. And what they do get doesn't go to pay the debt. It's the most convoluted, goofed-up structure because of these tax credits that the CRA is not getting the benefit of any possible revenue excess over expenses that could be derived from the ballpark. They're not. So where are we going with this? Revenue shortfall starting next year.
And what's going to happen? Well, they can raise the millage rate. That will not help attract businesses and residents.
It won't. And the millage rate has a cap on it too by statute. You can just go so high. And I think the taxpayers are going to say, you better not try to raise the millage rate, which is the tax rate against us. You better not do that when you have engaged in irresponsible fiscal conduct. And I think really this ballpark, the financing structure of this ballpark bill will be established to be before too long a real nightmare.
I don't disagree with you. I think both things are true. The experience is really good at baseball games. The park is well run. I mean, every employee's got a smile on his or her face. They do a nice job. I've been in lots of ballparks. It's a good experience, and the employees are great, and they run it well. But at the same time, it's a fiscal disaster for the city
because it produces no revenue for anything other than the Community Maritime Park, which is an entity that controls the ballpark. So that's the real problem with it. We're going to take a short break here in just a second, I think, about time for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the gas tax. Well, we'll stay on local issues here pretty much. We'll give you a little introduction to this before the break. On the gas tax, it was just voted, Bill, as you know, to
4 cents a gallon on everything but diesel.
4 cents a gallon. Well, we've looked into this, and we've found some things out about it that are raising some questions. Not only philosophical questions about how you should fund the public transportation system, but more importantly, what's really going on with the revenues and why are they doing it? I don't know if you've been reading the blogs and the responses to the News Journal story, but people are very upset about this tax.
Well, a lot of people are upset because they don't ride the bus, which is really short-sighted. I heard a quote from on the radio this morning. Some gentleman appeared at the county commission meeting and said, you weren't elected to be in the charity business, and charity should be left for the churches, and this is charity. And I just was dying to ask this guy, did you drive to this meeting on a public road? Did you pay a toll? Give me a break. Roads are subsidized. Airports are subsidized. Transportation in this country is subsidized. You're not going to run, if you agree, and I think we do, need a public transportation system so people who can't drive, they're handicapped or too poor to have a car or whatever the reason is or don't want to drive, can use public transportation. I don't think there may be some counter examples, but you're not going to be able to run it at break even, or you're going to have to charge poor people $5 a trip. You can't run it like a taxi service because you want to run it in the middle of the night when people have to get to the night shift at Sacred Heart, when you're running a great big diesel bus with 2 people in it. You do that as a public accommodation. It has to be supported by the public. I'm always against taxes, public anything, but this is one of the things that government must provide, and that is transportation.
Well, the beef from the beefers is that the tax is going solely to fund public transportation, not for roads and infrastructure and the things that you mentioned earlier. And that is the beef, that we are doing it in a way that causes a burden for many for the benefit of a few. But Bill made the best argument, I think, about public transportation. We're going to be back after this short break, and we're going to talk about what's really going on, we think, with these, all of the money guys hanging around the gas tax. It's like, why are you guys all down here talking about this? We'll be back here in just a minute.